it. For our viewers out there, we had 649 delegates that were accredited, but we also had delegates that joined us afterwards. And we had 2,868 virtual audience members. Don't you think that's amazing, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you. There were various TV and radio interviews held in national media on both, and then we also appreciate the NBC for streaming and airing the opening and closing of the conference. You know, this really allowed the whole and the entire nation to have an opportunity and a front seat, knowing that education quality is a shared responsibility. I'm just focusing on this to show that everything that you have here is because of collective efforts. Our logo was designed by Namibian Media Holdings. Paratus and Telecom Namibia provided the broadband access, and Consoft provided the conference lighting, the staging, the photography, sound, audio, visuals, and the simultaneous translation in 7 languages, ladies and gentlemen. And we are so proud of our 20 local exhibitors, which included book publishers, NGOs, handcrafters and artists, and then of course, many of you saw the regional education profiles that were made available. Now, just to say that on the 29th, we had 82 young people prior to this conference to really sit around the table and meaningfully participate, and their voices were also incorporated. We know that we had learners, community, traditional leaders, governors, the private sector, non-government organizations, as well as our UN partners and other partners that were an active part, and there was a lot of engagement also on the social media platforms. At the pre-summit, ladies and gentlemen, we've already talked about that. We were joined by 2 young, very, very able, eloquent, well-articulated young people who made the voices about Namibia heard in France. The recommendations from this conference will result in a drafting of a position paper on transforming education, first and foremost. And His Excellency, we envisage, will present at the Global UN Transforming Education Summit on the 19th of September 2022, Namibia's commitment to the world in terms of transforming education in the short, medium, and long term. And then you will also see, as I present the recommendations, in your mind you will already start crafting the ones that are low-hanging, as our minister would say. The ones that you can do immediately, the ones that you do in the medium term, and then on the long term. So Namibia's commitment is not the only responsibility of the education ministries, as we heard, but really it is a collective effort from all. We've had our Honourable Governor welcoming us. We have Mr. Abhijan Unrana, that were talking about the heavy generational learning losses on a global level that our learners were facing in terms of COVID and the impact that it had. And we also heard that Namibia is a leader in the region mitigating learning losses for children with disability. Our Honourable Minister made specific focus already to the global context, but also looked in terms of universal primary and secondary education that were introduced in 2013 and 2016. And she really requested for us, and I think we did justice to that we should be focusing and formulating clear, focused priorities and really actionable levers of change. The keynote speech by His Excellency emphasized the importance of education as a catalyst for social change and sustainable development, and the efficient use of resources. The fact that we should focus on the quality of education that will stand out as it is critical for the development of our nation. We've heard the conference theme, as Vaughan just reminded us, 4 days. We should be knowing them by heart. The first one is the one that Namibia led with Italy. Track 1, inclusive, equitable, safe and healthy schools. The second track is learning skills for life, work and sustainable development. The third track focused on the teachers, the teaching and the teacher profession. The fourth one looked at digital learning and transformation. And then the last one looked at financing education. And it was also around these key action tracks that we've built our regional consultations, our validation workshop, and now this national conference on education. A snapshot. Over the past 4 days, we've discussed school recovery from COVID-19, the transfer of early childhood education, and what to transfer to the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture that will still be further unpacked. Foundational learning with very strong foundation on early grade literacy and numeracy. We looked at what innovative funding mechanisms can we as a country come up with. Community engagement in education. We unpacked free education. What does it mean? How is it seen in sub-Saharan Africa? What does it mean to us in Namibia? And we said that we must still continue at our school level, regional, circuit level, and national level. We should continue to unpack and get more community ownership and understanding. We looked at teacher training and continuous professional development. We looked at the possibility, and not just the possibility, but there was a strong call that we must expedite the teacher professional regulatory body. Various psychosocial and school health-related matters were discussed in terms of the holistic development of a child, and of course the high levels of learner pregnancy and the impact of achievement of the boy child on his life, and of course where do we as a country get involved in. We further looked at inclusive technologies, the access thereto, the digital growth and transformation that starts from pre-primary or even before that. We looked at the importance of organizational development of the head office, regional offices, transformation thereof. How do we as a country promote and tap on the potential of arts, heritage and culture? What is the importance of school sport and physical education, and what is currently happening in terms of policies, frameworks, what's happening at the school level? Pre-vocational and TVET reforms and development were presented and unpacked. The articulation of qualifications, and of course the importance of arts and heritage in the development of our culture. Now, it will be presented, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll try to be as clear as possible. We look at track 1, where the focus is on inclusive, equitable, safe and healthy schools. The issue was that there's a problem with the access and reasonable accommodation for people with disability. That too little is being done, that a policy is being in place, but it's not implemented. I must also say that if we as a ministry don't go out and tell people more about what is actually happening within the ministry, the perception will be that it is not implemented. So the onus really rests on all of us at all levels to ensure that information is constantly shared and that there are always deliberative discussions going on about what we are doing. The recommendation is that we need to rethink the meaning of access, mainstream budgetary support, and national population and housing census is urgently needed to provide us with the latest statistics. In terms of underperformance and dropout of boys, we really need to focus on access and support of both boys and girls. And we must find the ways, and the answers are already with us. Life skills should have much more prominence, better resourced and better staffed. The issue of learner pregnancy remains a critical issue in this country, and it will continue to be a contentious, heartbreaking matter. stop making girls statistics, ladies and gentlemen. And we must start having the uncomfortable discussions at home and at school communities to address this issue. Cultural practices need to be looked into and robustly addressed. And the accountability of that sound, mature man with his own life, it's time that people must start naming and shaming across all their career paths so they can see who those stuff. It warms my collar, ladies and gentlemen, honestly, because we talk about repetition, you talk about somebody who could bring income for 7 to 14 people in a household. That's a woman, that's a girl child. And we destroy and cut it short. I feel, Honourable Minister, that this issue, like free education, we must continue to unpack it in the regions. Improvement of the quality and delivery of National School Nutrition Program. There is a need to roll out the homegrown school feeding program and improve on nutrition. And if there's anybody here who still do not know what the homegrown school feeding is, please contact your regional director to see how you can get involved. The second track covers from ECD up to lifelong learning. Learning and skills for life, work and sustainable development. How do we move ECD to the ministry, and what do we mean by ECD? Various discussions took place, the importance of the first 1,000 days in a life's child, the importance of making the investment before the child is born, and in the first 2 years, and continue with that investment. There was a long discussion about how we, the line ministries, are still working and dissecting the ages. Are we talking about ECD? What do we mean by that? And early childhood education, and from which ages are moving to education. So we also say that the sector must be regulated and quality improved, and facilitators and educators in the current ECD centers must be much more capacitated. In terms of numeracy and literacy as the foundation of all learning, education is not cheap. We must invest in education, and it is the best gift that a parent can give his child and a government can give his citizens. To invest in education, ladies and gentlemen. So we say that the resource envelope, we are prepared to sit down, throw open our books, our compliance audit, come and study it at the ministry. Our financial audits, you are welcome to come and see where does the money go, how the money is spent. We can account for it. So the issue of investment, like ECD, early grades need to be better funded. We have pre-primary currently, ladies and gentlemen. And I must tell you that the investment currently in pre-primary, you saw what was displayed this week. The skewed investment in tertiary education, while we are standing between 3 to 4% investment of primary education. Pre-primary now, specifically, pre-primary. So we need to scale that up. Much more emphasis must be placed on foundational phase-focused, literacy and numeracy, and provide the adequate TVET materials in schools. Still with action track 2, digital literacy. We had this fantastic presentation by our colleague from NAST. What are we going to do about it? Many of the teachers still lack the digital literacy skills, and they complain that without computers and assistive devices, it becomes a challenge for them. What is it that we embrace at this conference? We need to find the resources, the expertise truly for in-service training for teachers to build up their digital literacy skills. And you know who will be the facilitators? Many of the teachers themselves. Because many of them are savvy and we will use these teachers. So we must not beat around the bush. ICT, there was a request that it should be added as a key competency in teacher education programs. Now, if we look at track 3, where we talk about teachers, teaching, and the teaching profession, this is now, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, and our dear viewers, where we say that when we talk about education and the teacher's role as the biggest resource for the child in the classroom, then it doesn't start only and ends with the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture. There are various industries and other line ministries involved. First issue was we must regulate we must have a regulatory body, a teacher regulatory body that must be expedited. The process is on it has already started. There's been various engagements that's going on. We should fast track it. Even the Prime Minister showed a keen interest in us having that regulatory body for teachers finalized. We look at the challenge with aligning supply and demand of the teachers. We said every year too many primary teachers are in this system, while we sit with a lack of secondary teachers in specific subjects and also some languages. So the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture and Ministry of Higher Education, Training and Innovation and the higher education institutions must develop strategies to align the demand and supply. We have more than 16 private training colleges. More than 16. All of them are training teachers. At the end of the day, they come to the Minister of Education and say, Minister, it's because of education that we don't have a job. How are we regulating that? Who is responsible for that? Training and development of teachers rationalized. There is a review that's needed on how teachers are trained for specific subjects and also how they are deployed. I must here take off the hat, ministerial hat, for all our regional directors who've over the past 3 years have done an amazing job, absolutely amazing, in realigning and appointing teachers in their correct field of studies and addressing the issue of overstaffing and understaffing in many of the schools. Thank you, esteemed regional directors and your teams. Teachers, teaching and the teaching profession still, there's a recommendation that we must combine a newly appointed teacher with a much more experienced mentor. How do we do that? What do we put in place? It's not rocket science. It can be done. It can be done at the school level, in the community. Early grade teachers need to be deployed where they can speak the home language of the learners. That's a strong recommendation, so that we don't do more harm. And we must advocate for teachers who can really teach first languages at tertiary education institutions. We have a program, continuous professional development program, which we worked on with the University of Namibia. We say that continuous professional development needs to be reconceptualized and we must improve it. I'm almost done. The digital learning and transformation. What were the key issues that stood out here, ladies and gentlemen? One, the overall access of our learners across the country, but mostly in rural areas, in terms of ICT. And them not having the technologies and the connectivity in comparison to the other counterparts. The provision of all schools with broadband access, and of course a need, the whole issue around cross-sectoral approach to the provision of ICT in schools. 3 things: connectivity, data, devices. Those 3, we can also get that right to complement, because nobody and nothing can ever replace the teacher making the connection with the child. But we know with COVID that we need alternatives. Discuss in 2011. Now you see your learner population continue to grow. Your communities continue to grow, and communities are in far remote areas. And you put a school where your community is. So we need to partner with the private sector to support us with access to digital technologies and connectivity in our schools. And we should ensure that all teachers are connected. We must find innovative ways to do that. The answers are in this country. We should not talk past each other. There is a need for much closer collaboration, and also to put aside some egos and get things done, because we can. We are Namibians. What is it that we have not overcome, dear delegates, in this country? Why should ICT still in 2022 be such a critical issue with all our telecommunication companies, with the corporate entities that we have on board, with the private sector? Why should it still be an issue where we talk today about data connectivity devices? It's unacceptable. This is our country. These are our children. 1/3 of this country's population are in schools. So let's get it done. Can I please have an omake for that one? Better extension of access to broadband for all schools. Non-negotiable. We should stop being apologetic. Ministry of ICT must be an enabling partner with service providers. Not need to be, must be. Should be. Tech companies should come forward and tell us, this is what we prepare to do for you for free. And here we ask you to consider to cover this cost for us. And then we talk business. But now you said your whole budget must just go into one direction. The key is money to break the divide. We cannot continuously have one child have access to everything while another child. Then we cannot say as a country with pride that every child matters. And every child matters. So here our plea. Madam Director of Ceremonies, Deputy Executive Director Ms. Bourne, I'm in the financing of education, the last track, action track. We ended our discussion around the misconception, or maybe better information that must be shared for us to have much more well-informed leaders at political level, at other levels, executive, parliament, other levels where you are. Be well-informed, and for parents also to know what exactly we mean by fee-free. So there's a recommendation that we must review the fee-free education policy to establish a cost-sharing model in the financing of education. What cost is government going to carry? What cost is it that the private sector could and should and must assist us with, without taking things for granted, in all fairness? And what is it that the parents should contribute? So that was the key recommendations. There was also one that says we must consider a tax benefit strategy. A tax benefit strategy, because this country is a rich country. In terms of taxation for the mining, fishing and private sector, which really go beyond social corporate responsibilities. We already have a partnership forum. We have FANCY. Ladies and gentlemen, it was just because of time. We can come and account to you for every single cent that the UN partners, the corporate entities donate for a specific purpose, and how that money is being spent. That money is audited. We have audit reports for our FANCY, but there was still a call that we re-establish the partnership forum, also with development partners, to engage in critical really understand what do we mean with free education and how they can embrace their role in terms of parental and community contributions. I said earlier, and I will repeat, parents are prepared to invest. They are prepared to, and they are willing. They just want to know how my money is spent. They want to see results. So that partnership at the school level should be strengthened. And we must conduct an assessment on the impact of fee-free education, especially for Namibia. How are we responding to the NDP 5 and the Harapé Prosperity Plan 2? In terms of the early grade literacy numeracy initiative, we respond to NDP 5. We saw that in NDP 4 and the Harapé Prosperity Plan 2, the issue of ECD transfer is still there. It took South Africa from 2008, since the concept was, the idea came about for it to be moved. It took them many years before they could finally, within the last few years, move it over. For us, it is still a medium to long-term issue. Establishment of the teacher regulatory body responds to HPP2, and the provision of electricity and internet to schools also respond to HPP2. We just want you to see how things are aligned. Now, basically, what is the takeaway? What is it that we all, if an interviewer walk up to you now, or somebody wake you up at 2 in the morning, I do hope they don't do it. Because they will test our capacities to recall. But if somebody asks you, what are the 4 main things that you want to take away from this education conference, or that was presented as takeaways? You have your own views of how you see the conference. You know, how meaningful it was it deep purposeful, did you have time for internalizing? But the 4 key things, a summary is just that. We wish, in terms of resourcing quality education, that we keep on talking about, we must introduce a National Corporate Social Investment Act. Now, with an act, we know that there is something which is long-term. And a cost-sharing model, but a cost-sharing model shouldn't be long-term. To strengthen private and community inputs into education, institute a donor forum where we can align all donor interests with its priorities. We have the fancy, but fancy people still say, I'm giving you 250,000, but I wanted to go to that school in Kunene. On the other hand, you must also allow people a certain sense of freedom of how they wish and where they wish to see change and transformation. The education office transformation, head office and regional office, we will need to restructure. We need to become much more cost-effective and much more responsive. With the fact that we are not filling certain vacancies now, we've become tripled. That is honest. Certain vacancies cannot be filled. New HOD positions are not allocated to a school, even if they do qualify. Why? Because we try to work within and stay within the wage bill. So how can we transform head office and regional office to make sure that the offices really serve in a decentralized function effectively, and how can they reimagine their roles in relation to schools and early childhood education science? A reform of the teacher training process, that is what we actually look forward to from UNEP, to tell us how did you transform your teacher training? What is it that you've done, for example? But UNEP is not the only university that trains teachers. So how can we reform teacher training so that teachers are much more practice-oriented, and institutions that are actually training the teachers align the supply of teachers by phase and subject to the projected needs of the system? All these colleges send their curriculum to NEET, who already are understaffed, and our NEET colleagues have to assess whether this teacher training, is relevant to our curriculum. But we add a disclaimer when we write NQ. literacy and numeracy drive on a political and community level is needed. We need to start at the basics, and that's your foundational skills. Move right through lifelong learning and address the challenges related to repetition that we heard. We must address, ladies and gentlemen, the internal efficiencies in the system. We've tried doing that, but we have now to be much more deliberative and find out strategies and specific actions as to how we're going to do that. So, these 4 initiatives that I referred to will mobilize and leverage resources for education, will indeed advance the literacy and numeracy and make it a national priority, even while mother is cooking or while auntie or grandma is cooking or grandpa is sitting outside enjoying the sun. Grandpa will say, "Come and read for me, my child." That it has become a national priority. We raise the profile of early grades and put much more focus on the critical role of early grade teaching and the inclusion of learners with learning challenges or learning barriers. Train and capacitate teachers better and deploy them to where they add most value. That's another issue. Listen to the word deploy them. Transform head office and regional education offices to provide the sustained support that is so much needed for the schools. Ladies and gentlemen, these will become the key pillars of the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture's plan for implementation in the short, medium and long term. Key priorities will also inform the education chapter in the 6th National Development Plan. From 2023 it should be 2023 to 2030, 7 years. And then I just want to remind, in terms of our planning cycle, that His Excellency will deliver our Namibia's position paper at the UN. I sincerely thank you, ladies and gentlemen.